The Kingdom of Edeneth hasn't always been this shining beacon of civilization. While things like banditry and violence are nearly non-existent these days, they were quite common in the early years of this land, before there was any form of centralized government. As king, it is required that I know the history of our land prior to my rule, and prior to the monarchy itself. But my knowledge only goes so far. Today, I turn you over to a more qualified mind, a top librarian and historian, who is currently at a dig site of what he believes is an ancient temple. Huh, how appropriate.
Oh, yes, hello. I was informed you would be arriving soon. Before we actually get into it, there are a few things we must first define in regards to the passage of time. Okay, this may get a bit meta, but believe me, it will be much simpler if we get this out of the way immediately. It is also important to note that we cannot skip nights. The basic unit of time is, of course, the day, which is measured as exactly one full day and night cycle, which lasts 20 minutes. That is, 20 of your minutes. 1 month is defined by one full lunar cycle, which lasts 8 days. Determining exactly how many days would comprise a year was a bit difficult for early horologists, as in our world there are not many other cyclical patterns we can use as a measurement. And, at least as far as we can tell, our sun actually does revolve around our planet, if we can even call it that, as, again, as far as we can tell, it actually is flat. However, the consensus is that 1 year is one 24-hour period. That is, 24 of your hours. Okay, quick recap. 1 day is 1 day-night cycle, 1 month is 8 days, and 1 year is 72 days, or 9 months. Get it? Got it? Good. Moving on. Now, if we are going to do this, we are going to do it right. Starting at the very beginning, the beginning of time itself. The temple we uncovered has detailed, first-hand accounts of the actual creation of our world. And what they say is that in the beginning, there was nothing. Then suddenly there was one. He first created the world. Then, from that one, came the first people who would populate the world. They had no tools, no shelter from the weather or creatures that would appear at night. He told them it was up to them to survive, and only by perseverance would they live. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. But they knew he was watching over them, giving them guidance. The people spread out through the lands, exploring and gathering resources. Naturally, most gathered into shared villages to make surviving easier. In this way, they could diversify their labor and specialize, some preferring to explore any caves they could find, some staying above ground to tend to their fields and livestock. These early societies did as the one had instructed and survived, and soon started to thrive. As the years went by, they became more and more sustainable, and these little villages started to expand to allow more and more people into their tribes. As these tribes expanded, they started interacting with the other tribes for the first time since the creation of the world. For some, it was bountiful. Barter started between the tribes, the start of commerce. But for others, tragedy. Not all the tribes were peaceful. Some found their thrills in destroying other villages, robbing travelers and convoys, living off the goods of others. Wars would break out, violence and bloodshed. Some say this broke the one's heart, and his presence dwindled. Truly a tragic era indeed. Thankfully, it was not to last long. This would later be known as the First Contact Wars. As they raged, smaller tribes began to disappear, either being completely wiped out or being assimilated into a larger tribe for protection. Some of the very small tribes survived simply by being too small to be worth attacking. Soon large tribes became commonplace, and the beginnings of the 5 cities we know today started to form. Barter increased, evolving into a true world economy. Ironically, the wars hit the nomadic bandit tribes the hardest, as they were unable to recuperate after a loss as fast as the cities could. They thinned and became less and less a threat to the general population. This increase in safety allowed for some to pursue more intellectual fields. They started experimenting with enchanting their weapons and tools, and took to writing down and recording the events of the world. Those that remained in the actual fields worked on making their farms larger and more efficient, as well as beginning to exploit the labor of the simple-minded natives. This era of cohabitation laid the groundwork for our glorious kingdom today.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Librarian. I shall take it from here.
My pleasure, my king.
The remaining factions decided that more progress can be made if they band together to form a centralized government. The faction leaders, wealthy resource farmers, and great intellectuals of the time gather for a summit in neutral territory in the center of the 5 largest cities to agree on terms. These terms included, first, the Universal Peace Treaty, prohibiting any and all interpersonal violence, theft, warfare, and all manner of griefing. Tribes who break this treaty forfeit their right to the protections granted by the kingdom. As the tribes became more homogenized, this was amended to the banishment of repeat offenders. Second, collecting and redistributing necessary resources for all city residents. Third, establishing a formal military body that protects the people of the kingdom from bandits and monster mobs. Fourth, use of that military to enforce the Universal Peace Treaty. And finally, establishing a supreme monarch with a group of advisors who inform his decision. The terms were agreed upon, and many vied for the title of monarch. Ultimately, it was a warrior from Arcturus named Kira who took the crown for his dedication to peace and his strong ability to enforce it. Once all were in agreement, they became his council, and thus the Kingdom of Edeneth was birthed. And the capital city of this new kingdom was to be constructed on the very mountain that they convened. The kingdom continued to thrive, and the cities grew to more closely resemble the metropolises that you can see now. Even as its foundations were being laid, the city of Pollux was home to many major advancements, including the first Nether portal and the discovery of the first End portal. The raid against the Ender Dragon occurred, around year 245, yes, during which King Kira himself led the soldiers into battle, an event that would go on to become legendary. A few years later, he announced that his time of rule was up, and it was time for a new monarch for a new era. The king and his council decided that as a king steps down, one from the council will be voted into kingship, and his seat on the council replaced. It is said that after King Kira stepped down, he didn't return to Arcturus, but rather, he went to reside in one of the villages where he could lead a simple and peaceful life. In those days, the only major religion in the world was dedicated to remembering the one who created it. However, as the kingdom grew, the government decided that this was an old-fashioned tradition and was no longer necessary. The Order of the One refused to stop worshipping, insisting that the One would return. And so the king decided to exile the remaining followers into the Outlands, where the last of the bandit tribes roamed. The major cities remained in constant development for a long time, and they were all completely constructed by the year 500. By that time, several kings had ruled, and by the time I came into power, the kingdom had long since achieved equilibrium. Which brings us here, to now. The year is 752. I, King Opul, rule this land with a gentle but firm hand. As king, it is my duty to ensure that the kingdom my successor receives is the same or better than the one I received. With things going as they are, I can proudly say that this will be the case.